Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Page 95. Let me just share the screen here. Sorry. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Alright, okay. So, page 95, line 5. وإن تجرد عن المادة فإن تعلق بالجسم تعلق التدبير والتصرف فنفس إنساني أو فلكي أو تعلق الإيجاد والتأثير فعقل وتحته عقول 10. So, last session we finished with the discussion of the definition of substance, and we managed to distinguish three types of substance. Substance, you'll recall, was what? It was the contingent existent, right, which exists in something else, but not in such a way that that something else makes that existence subsist or contributes to its subsistence. And we said that this was what it means to say that it's an existent, not in a subject, where a subject is a certain kind of substrate or a locus that contributes to the existence of what exists in it, right? So that was substance. Any questions about that? Was that relatively clear?
Yes.
So the example I gave was, like a table, just for example's sake, a table and its color. The table would be a substance because it doesn't exist in anything else such that something else makes it subsist. Unlike its color feature or, its size or something, right? Like the size of the table exists in the table, can't exist without it. The table is a condition for the existence of its, let's say, particular size or particular color or what have you. Right? Substance lacks that. Substances lack that feature, right? They have this kind of independence of a subject, right? Mudarris, does that make sense? Is that clearer? Because I remember you wanted some examples. I hope that example is helpful.
No, the example was very helpful.
Right.
That made it clear.
So if you take like a, you can even take, and just say like a, like a human being or an animal or a plant or something, and then think about like it as an object itself in relation to, the various features that it has. It doesn't exist in something else in the way that they exist in it. Namely, it conditions their existence. They can't exist without it, but it's not like that. That's not to say that, it's completely independent in its existence. It's just independent in a certain way, namely of some other thing in which it exists that's a condition for its existence, right? And this thing, in which it exists is of a specific sort because it can exist in other things, right? But those things don't contribute to its existence or don't make it subsist or are not conditions for it. Like, it's existing in the room, let's say, right? It exists in the room, but that doesn't preclude it from being a substance because the room is not a condition for the existence of the plant or table or whatever, right? Okay. And then, Sheikh Mudarris divided substance into two kinds. He said either they are material or not, right? Either they are material in that they are related somehow to matter, and then he specifies that relation, right? And depending on what it is, we either get a natural body, which is the first kind of substance, or we get what he called prime matter, which is the second kind of substance, and we get form, which is the third kind of substance. All of these are material because they bear a relation to matter. Body bears, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to ask
Yeah.
a question.
No worries.
When the philosophers say that X is material, do they just simply mean that it's related to matter? Because when I think about X as material, I think that it's this concrete material thing experimentally. But it seems like they're saying something a bit more broad, that if it even has the characteristics of matter, such as space, time, etc., then it's considered material. Is that how they always imply it, or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's more or less correct. When they say that something is maddi, that's usually what they mean, right? Sometimes you'll find them say something is jismani, for example, bodily. That's a more specific claim, right? But maddi is, it's usually meant in this broad sense that Sheikh Mudarris here specifies, right? In terms of like what type of relation. And as you recall, he says it's either a mereological one or a logical one or a inherence relation, right? He says there's a note that I wanted to make, which is a subtlety, but I think it's important to note it for now. He says when he distinguishes body or natural body as a substance, he says, if that substance is characterized by dimensions, the 3 dimensions, then it is a natural body, right? I think strictly speaking, it should be if that substance is characterizable by the 3 dimensions, then it's a natural body, right? It's not that it be actually characterized by a determinate dimensions, but that it be susceptible to that it be such that you can posit 3 dimensions in it. There's in other words, possibility of positing the 3 dimensions in it, then that would be natural body, right? It's not the actual characterization by 3 determinate dimensions that distinguishes it as a body, because as the Sheikh says in several places, those can actually change, right? But the body remains a body still. So he gives the example of and it's actually the same example that Sheikh Mudarris gives here in one of the footnotes. He gives the example of like a piece of wax. He says that, the piece of wax has a certain, let's say, determinate dimensions, right? But these can change. Like if you bring it, near some heat or something, they change, but the wax nevertheless remains, a body, right? So it's this susceptibility to being extended in 3 dimensions that's characteristic of it as a body, right? And not the actual determinate dimensions, not actually being characterized by a given set of determinate 3 dimensions. So we'll take what Sheikh Mudarris says here to mean, to be this possibility claim and not the actuality claim. Does that make sense? Okay.
So are you saying something like it's because it's possibly associated with tridimensionality than it is a body?
Yeah, like it in the sense of it's characterizable by those 3 dimensions. You can posit. There's the possibility of positing them in the thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that they could be, any given determinate dimensions. They don't have to be a specific determinate dimension or determinate dimensions, right?
Yeah.
So that's a subtlety, but I think it's important to keep that in mind, because it becomes crucial actually in the discussion in philosophy proper, over, the nature of body as consisting of prime matter and form, right? It becomes a crucial, I think, premise in the argument for the existence of prime matter, but we're not going to get into that. But it's just something to note, that the reality of being a body is in its susceptibility to 3 dimensionality, not in its being actually characterized by a determinate set of 3 dimensions.
Okay, I see now. And that's where the wax example comes into play, because if it's the actuality of a particular 3 dimensions, then if it let's say changes by deteriorating,
Yeah.
it's no longer characterized by that particular 3 dimensions.
Exactly. Like when you melt the wax, it doesn't have those dimensions anymore, but it's nevertheless a body.
Yeah.
Right. It's just now extended in different, in a different set of determinate dimensions. Right. Interestingly, you probably recall this, Nassar. Descartes gives the same example in the Meditations.
I thought about that the moment you brought up this example, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Let you know later.
Yeah. He brings up the same to argue.
Yeah. He must have never said it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Some people say he did actually in Latin. He must have read him through the scholastics, of course. But I think that example in him comes from ultimately the Sheikh, but through probably these scholastic intermediaries. Okay. So that's characterizability by tridimensionality is bodily substance, natural body. If it's not characterizable, then the substance would be a part of the natural body. And that part, if it is the part which explains the potential existence of the natural body, in other words, why there's potentially a body, then that part is called prime matter. And if it explains why that body is actually a body, if it's the part that explains that, then it is called form, right? And the combination of the two is what the body is in itself, right? It's composed of those two substances. Okay, so that's where we left off last session. We didn't read the footnotes, so we should get to them now. The first footnote, page 95, footnote 11. Here he's going to explain those 3 relations that I clarified. The 3 relations that are involved in something's being related to matter or being material, in a substance's relation to matter. He says, footnote 11, that's right here. النسبة إلى المادة نسبة الكل إلى الجزء في قسم الأول، أعني الجسم فإنه كل والمادة أي الهيولة جزءه. So the relation to matter is a relation of the whole to the part in the first division, I mean body, so bodily substance. For a body, okay, is a whole, and matter, i.e. prime matter, is its part. ونسبة الخاص إلى العام في القسم الثاني أعني الهيولة لأنها منسوبة باعتبار تحققها العيني إلى مطلق المادة. And the relation to matter يعني is the relation of the specific to the general in the second case, in the second division, namely prime matter, i.e. prime matter is said to be related to matter. How? As something specific to something general. Because prime matter is related to matter in the respect of its concrete realization, okay, to something that is, absolute. So it's like the concrete instance of something non-concrete, something general, something mutlaq. Okay, so that's the logical relation that I mentioned. And والنسبة الحال الجوهري إلى المحل الجوهري في الثالث فإن الصورة حالة في المادة. And substance is related to matter like some substantial thing that inheres in something else, okay, in a locus that's also substantial, in the third case, the third division, namely surah, right? Surah is said to be maddi. Surah is a substance. It's said to be maddi. How? In that it inheres in matter, as where matter is its substrate. For the form inheres in matter. Okay, so those are the 3 relations. He said, al-ab'ad al-thalatha. in this footnote 12, he clarifies what they are. He says الطول والعرض والعمق وبعبارة أخرى الخط والسطح والجسم التعليمي. He says those three dimensions, namely length, width, and depth, or in other words, line, surface, and mathematical body. Okay. The 13th footnote. He said, فهو الهيولا. So what is hayula? He says, فهيولا جزء جوهري للجسم يوجد معه الجسم بالقوة، والصورة جزء جوهري للجسم يوجد معه الجسم بالفعل لأنه الجزء الأخير منه. So this is so prime matter is the substantial or the substantive part of a body with which the body exists in potentiality, and the form is the substantive part of the body with which the body exists in actuality, because it, i.e. the form, is the last part of it, i.e. of the body, i.e. it's the part that is such that, when it exists, the whole exists. That's what it means to say it's the last part here. Al-Juz al-Akhir. And then he gives an example of, he gives an analogy to represent this relation between form and matter with respect to body. He says, وَقَدْ يُتَخَيِّلُ هَذَانَ الْجُزْآنِ بِقُطْنٍ تَفَشَّى بِحُلُولِ الْهَوَاءِ فِيهِ أو بِقُطْنٍ تَشَرَّبَ دُهْنًا. He says, and these two parts, namely form and matter, have been represented by the expansion of cotton, by the inherence or the entering in of air in it, right? So here you can think of the cotton like, it's matter or prime matter, and the air that enters it and then, spreads it or expands in it as like the form. Okay, so form is in matter, something like that, right? Or he says, بِقُطْنٍ تَشَرَّبَ دُهْنًا, or like cotton that has been like soaked or permeated by oil, right? Where again the cotton is like, prime matter, and the oil is like form that completely permeates it. Okay, these are just representations to kind of help you get a handle on the form-matter relation, right? It's this like really tight metaphysical relation. He said, next, وَهُوَ الصُّورَةِ. It's footnote 14. Here he makes a comment about the interdependence of form and matter. He says, وَكُلٌّ مِنَ الْهَيُولَةِ وَالْصُورَةِ تحتاج إلى الأخرى بجهة غير جهتها، فإن احتياج الهيولة إلى الصورة في البقاء واحتياج الصورة إلى الهيولة في التعين. He says that, each one of the two, i.e. prime matter and form, depends on the other. However, in two different ways, i.e. the way prime matter depends on form is not the way form depends on prime matter. How does prime matter depend on form? Prime matter depends on form for its persistence, baqa. But form depends on prime matter for its individuation, for being rendered, an individual, a this, as opposed to remaining, an abstraction, remaining general. So even though they're interdependent, it's not viciously circular because the way that they depend on each other differs. Okay? Mafhum or no?
You said it one more time.
Is that clear?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Oh, about the interdependence?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's saying here that, so prime matter and form, they, in other words, they can't exist apart from each other. Okay? They depend on each other in order to exist. However, the way in which they depend on each other for being is not the same. Okay? Prime matter depends on form in order to, he says, fil baqa. Baqa is like, persistence. For existing at a time and through time. Okay? But form depends on prime matter in order to be individuated, in order to be rendered, a determinate entity, a particular thing, right? So, for example, an example of a form would be tableness. Let's go back to our table, okay? So if you take tableness, that's a form. That's different from the form of chairness, okay? Now, in order for tableness to become concrete, in other words, for it to become this particular table here, the one that my papers are on right now, the one that's in front of me, okay? It has to be connected to matter, okay? Which in this case is this wood here, right? So someone, the carpenter, took that form of tableness and he imposed it on some block of wood, and now I have this table here, this particular one. I don't have tableness. I have this table, and the table in front of you is that table. These are concrete entities. And the tableness form was rendered concrete, was rendered as this by the matter. Okay? In this case, the, respective blocks of wood. Okay? So that's what ta'ayyun here means. Individuation. Right? So that's how form depends on, matter. I don't want to get into this too much because this is actually a question for, philosophy proper. Right? But he simply just mentions this in passing, almost. Right? Just to make the point about how the interdependence of form and matter is not problematic because the aspects of dependence are different here. Okay? They don't depend on each other in the exact same way. Okay? One depends for persistence, one depends for individuation. Okay? But this issue is clarified in metaphysics when this, topic is treated. Let's see. Okay. The next footnote was about surah. Sorry, about what? Oh, yeah. وَالْجِسْمُ مُرَكَّبٌ مِنْهُمَا. Here, I'm not going to read this footnote. He gets into here about the reason why the hukama posit the existence of prime matter and form. Okay, again, this is a topic for metaphysics proper, and it's not relevant for our purposes, so I'm going to skip this footnote. But he just goes through at least one or two of the main premises in the case that the hukama make for the existence of these two kinds of substances. Okay, namely hayula and surah, right? Because their existence is not obvious. Okay, it requires some justification, and there's a disagreement about them. So he just alludes to that here, but we don't need to get into that. So I'm going to skip it.
Actually, isn't it the secondary matter that individuates a thing in another thing? Prime matter would be common to them in the sense of it being pure potentiality.
No, that's not the case. But I'm not going to explain why right now.
Okay.
Just let's just sort of leave a question mark over that. But secondary matter plays a role, but it doesn't play the sort of fundamental basic individuation role. It has another role, but it's not ta'ayyun. It's not called ta'ayyun, right? And to see that clearly, we got to specify like exactly what ta'ayyun involves and what work secondary matter does and how that's different from ta'ayyun, right? But we'll look at that in its own place, inshallah. Okay, so we distinguished 3 kinds of substances, all of which are material, right? Natural body, prime matter, and form. According to the Hukama, Shaykh Mudarris goes on to say here, there are 2 more kinds of substance. Okay? There's what is called soul, okay? And what is called intellect. And these 2 are divisions of non-material substance or immaterial substance. Okay? In other words, they are not material. They are said to be not material in that they do not have a relation to matter in any of the 3 ways just mentioned. Okay? Not that they have no relation to matter at all, but that they don't have a relation to matter. They're not maddi in any of the 3 ways just mentioned, namely as either, whole part or specific general or an inherence relation, right? They are distinguished by that from material substances. However, one can say that they do bear a certain relation to matter. It's a much weaker relation. And depending on what kind of relation it is, we get 2 types of non-material substance. Okay? So the first kind, Shaykh Mudarris says, is if the substance is not material, okay, then either it has some kind of ta'alluq to matter, okay, and here ta'alluq is, you can translate as like is somehow connected or attached to matter, okay, then this attachment is either of 2 types. Either it's an attachment of what's called tadbir and tasarruf, which means something like governance and management. Okay, so this non-material substance governs and manages matter somehow. Okay, that's the case. Then the substance is called soul. Okay, or psychological substance. Right? It's a substance that has a governing or a managing role with respect to matter. Right? So that's the 4th kind of substance. Soul. Now, the details of that governing relation or that managing relation, that's clarified again in philosophy, in natural philosophy specifically, in the discussion about, the nature of soul, ilmun nafs. Okay? So we leave that out though. It's just important for now to just keep that, broad notion in mind. This governance management relation, which marks off soul. Or that attachment could be of the following sort. Namely, it's just in terms of causal existentiation, ijad, wa ta'thir. Okay, so efficient causal influence, which consists in actually bringing about body into existence. Okay, so the non-material substance either has a managing / governing role with regards to matter, or it actually has an existentiating role with regards to matter, i.e. it brings about matter into existence. And if it's that second kind, then that substance is called intellect. Okay? So we then have 5 basic types of substance: body, prime matter, form, soul, intellect. Okay? Does that make sense? Is that clear? Any questions here? Okay. So this is the basic division of substance according to the Hukama then, right? He says, go back to the text here. Okay, so وَإِن تَجَرَّدَ عَنَ الْمَادَّةِ, if the substance is independent of matter, right? This is page 95, line 5. If the substance is independent of matter, okay, as opposed to being maddi, it's not maddi. فإن تعلق بالجسم تعلق التدبير والتصرف فنفس. If it's independent of matter, then if it is connected to body, okay, by way of governance and management, then it is soul, i.e. the substance is of the soul type. And that itself is of 2 kinds, or he gives 2 examples of it. He says either it is, of the human kind or the celestial kind. Okay? Celestial souls. إنساني أو فلكي. Or if it is connected to body, فإن تعلق بالجسم, but تعلق الإيجاد والتأثير, but it's a connection of existentiation, okay, or efficient causal influence, i.e. in bringing about a body into being, then it is called intellect. That substance is called intellect. Okay, وَتَحْتَهُ عُقُولٌ أَشَرَةٌ, and what fall under it, i.e. the category of intellect, are the 10 intellects. And this is a reference to the cosmology of the Hukama, with their belief in a series of, these intellectual entities that mediate our relation to God, as some of you know, but we're not going to get into that, right? But that's the yeah.
So an animal soul then is not considered a soul; it's considered a form.
Well, I was actually going to mention this. He doesn't categorize it here as being a kind of soul. I'm not sure why, but that's not the case according to the Hukama, as you know. So, the animal soul is also a soul. However, because he mentions, this tadbir tasarruf relation, and he probably has a specific meaning of that in mind, he excludes animals from that. But that's not, strictly speaking, correct, right? Because in just a broad sense, as clarified in Ilm al-Nafs, especially in terms of the operations, as you know, of like the animal and vegetative capacities, that's what tadbir and tasarruf involve, right? So he should have, I think, added haywani as well, right? But he doesn't, for some reason, I'm not sure.
Because of this immaterial condition that he puts on these soul and intellect.
Yeah, I think so, right? Again, this tajarrad an al-madda, he probably has a strong reading of tajarrud here, right? if we just read it, as I said, as the negation of being maddi, which is the negation of one of the or any of the three ways that he spoke of, okay, then that would not be a reason to exclude animal souls, right? Because it would apply to animal souls as well. Do you see what I'm saying? Unless you read tajarrada in the strong sense of something like can exist independent of matter, then yeah, right? Perhaps that's the meaning that he has in mind. But if we read tajarrada as just being not maddi, which means not being related to matter in one of the three ways he mentioned, i.e., mereologically, or in terms of, or logically, or in terms of actually, no, that now that I think about it, I think he does it, he doesn't include it because the tajarrada excludes the inherence relation, right? And animal souls, according to the hukama, are souls that inhere in bodies. So yeah, that just occurred to me now. So I think he doesn't include it, as you said, because of the tajarrada clause, where that excludes specifically the third kind of relation to matter, which is the inherence relation. Yeah. So I think the way he divides the different kinds of substances is why he doesn't mention animal souls under the tajarrada and al-madda. Yeah, as I was saying, so I think that's right, Asim. Specifically, it excludes the third kind of relation to matter, which is this inherence relation, and that's why he doesn't mention animals or animal soul as under that second category of not being maddi. But the hukama, they don't necessarily will make the division this way. There are a couple of ways you can go about it, but it need not be this particular way specifically. The main division into maddi, understood in one of these three ways, and ghair maddi. But I think because he does it that way, that's why he's forced not to mention animal souls as souls, or as under the category of soul. Does that make sense? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. What's that?
Can you hear me? Or no?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right? But yeah, according to the hukama, though, they would be considered, entities that have a certain relation to body, where that relation is one of management. Right? Yeah. So that's I think a slight nuance in the division because of what he takes to be the basis of it. Right? Okay. Yeah, so he says insani or falaki, two kinds of nafs that are, mujarradun an al-madda, in that they don't inhere in matter, nor are they wholes which have matter as a part, nor are they parts along with matter to compose something else. Yeah, and then the intellect is the kind of substance that has an existentiation relation to matter, or brings about matter. He has a footnote here, which I'm also going to skip over because it's not, strictly speaking, relevant to us. Or actually, one of them is relevant to us, where he mentions something about soul. He says, let me share the screen. he says, فإن تعلق بالجسم تعلق التدبير والتصرف فنفس. And then in footnote he says فالنفس جوهر مجرد متعلق بالأجسام أي بالبدن الإنساني والجسم الفلكي تعلق التدبير والتصرف. So the soul is a immaterial substance connected to bodies, either human body or a celestial body, right, like the celestial sphere, by way of governance and management. ثم النفوس غير متناهية كالأبدان المتعلقة هي بها عند المشائين ومتناهية عند الإشراقيين القائلين بالتناسخ. So it says, further, souls are unlimited like the bodies to which they, here, are connected, okay, to which they, the souls, are connected, according to the masha'is. Okay, the souls and the bodies to which they are connected are unlimited. And limited according to the Ishraqis, who believe in transmigration. Okay. He says that the abdan, according to the Mashayis, are unlimited. But I don't think that's correct. They think the souls are unlimited, but not the bodies. Right? And according to the Ishraqis, they are limited. Namely, the souls are limited. Presumably because they believe in transmigration. Alright, this is interesting. Shaykh al-Ishraq himself, if I recall correctly, he actually denies transmigration, tanasukh, in most of his works, but seems to accept it, or is at least sympathetic to it, in the Hikmat al-Ishraq, right?
What is the transmigration?
It's, souls going from bodies to bodies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like reincarnating in a different body. Yeah. Yeah. He seems to be sympathetic to that view, or at least a certain limited kind of tanasukh in the Hikmat al-Ishraq, and later Ishraqis, are pretty clear that he endorsed tanasukh of some sort, right? So, there are a finite amount of souls that, some of which exchange bodies for various reasons. They seem to have held a view like that. But I'm not sure about the details of that. But he says here, according to the Mashayis, the bodies, like the souls, are unlimited too. I don't think that that's right. I think the bodies, they take to be limited, although the souls, they need to be, they thought were unlimited. Like, for example, they thought there were an infinite amount of human souls because, the world is eternal and there have always been human beings. And, yeah. But they didn't say that about bodies. In any case, that's not, pertinent to our concerns. In the next footnote, he goes into some detail about why the Hukama admitted the existence of this intellectual kind of substance. Okay? And he goes into an explanation of their cosmology a bit, which I'm not going to read, but I'll just kind of summarize what he's doing here. He basically explains the gist of why they said that there are these intellectual substances, and the main reason why they did that, according to him, is because of this, as you guys know, rule of the one, as it's called. right? That from an entity that is absolutely simple, only a single entity can originate or emanate or come about. And this entity, given their ontology, is either going to be a substance or is going to be an accident of some sort. And if it's going to be a substance, then as we just saw, it's going to have to be, one of the 5 kinds of substance, right? And then they rule out that it can be a bodily substance or a psychological substance, namely a soul, or that it can be prime matter or form. They rule out all those 4 candidates as to what that single effect can be, and then they conclude that it must be, by a process of elimination, intellect, the intellectual kind of substance, right? Having also ruled out that it can't be an accident of any sort. And we'll get into the various kinds of accidents that they distinguish, right? So that's how they get to the existence of the intellectual kind of substances. And he goes into that a bit in this footnote, right? The only part I want to actually look at from this footnote is on the next page here. It's interesting thing he says, which indicates, where he stands, which I'm sure was already familiar to you. He says here, right here, وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ. So having explained the reasoning and the views of the hukama on aql and why there must be these uqul, he says, all right, as a mutakallim, وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ مَرْدُودٌ بِأَدِلَّةٍ قَاطِعَةٍ. And all of that is basically rejected or refuted by decisive arguments. And it is established that al-wahid al-haqiqi yasduru minhu jami' al-ashya'i bila wasitatin fi at-ta'thir. And it is established that the truly one entity, namely God, all things come to be from that entity without any intermediary in ta'thir, in causal influence, right? Which is in direct contradiction with the view of the hukama, right? This is basically right here a rejection of the rule of one, that the many can come from the one without any intermediaries, right? بلا واسطة في التأثير يعني وبلا واسطة إعدادية, as the hukama would say. So there are 2 kinds of intermediaries that can operate in the transmission of causal influence from a source. What they call a wasita i'dadiyya, a preparatory intermediary, okay, which is the view of the hukama, or a wasita adiyya. So wasita i'dadiyya or wasita adiyya. Wasita adiyya is like a kind of, for lack of a better term, a customary intermediary. So a preparatory intermediary and a customary intermediary. The mutakallimun endorse these customary intermediaries, right? Wasa'id adiyya, right? And this is based on, as you guys know, their occasionalist theology. Intermediaries in God's influence are merely occasions for God to act. They actually don't do anything, right? Strictly speaking, in terms of ta'thir, right? They're just customary, and they could be replaced easily if God so chooses, right? Wasita adiyya. For the hukama, they believe in a wasita i'dadiyya, preparatory intermediaries that actually, do contribute causally, and they cannot just be replaced willy-nilly with any other given thing to bring about a certain effect, right? So when he says here, بلا واسطة في التأثير, he means kind of وسائط the hukama indoors, which are these preparatory conditions. Okay, so I leave the rest of that footnote. Sorry? What's that, Akhi? I didn't get that.
I think maybe it's a connection problem.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, so any questions about that?
Well, I guess I have like a question about the customary aspect.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
in that case, those things which are basically opportunities or occasions, as you said.
Yeah.
For God to act.
Yeah.
Those things. Because I'm trying to understand how this is distinct from like something that's preparatory. So is it just merely distinct in the sense that it could have been otherwise, whereas like something preparatory is necessary?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say like that's what distinguishes them? Because it seems to me that like if we don't make that distinction, then they're kind of the same, right? In the sense that there has to be this thing by which, God acts.
Yeah, the hukama committed to this necessity claim.
Yeah.
It has to be there, this thing.
Yeah.
It must be there.
Whereas for that side, if I pick up a cup,
yeah,
that me picking up that cup, if you will, is just an occasion for God to be the cause.
Yeah. Of the let's say whatever the effect is, right?
Whatever the effect is, yeah. Which, like, without distinguishing, or without adding that other factor, it seems like it's not distinguishable from a preparatory element.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's one of the important, distinguishing marks, that the customary is supposed to be a denial of this necessity claim.
Yeah.
Right. It's supposed to be actually an affirmation of just a mere possibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Or it could have been Zayd instead of me who picked up that cup in order for that cause to be in place, right?
Yeah, or, I mean, better example, you just start the standard example. It's like, it could have been, let's say, snow that produced the heat. Had God willed.
Yeah.
But he, for reasons unbeknownst to us, just chooses to produce heat on the occasion of fire contacting, let's say, the piece of cotton, right?
So are they
but that's purely contingent.
Yeah, are they realist with respect to forms?
Who?
The form of fire.
The theologians?
Yeah.
Realist with respect to forms?
Yeah, because when you say that for them,
yeah.
Fire could have, let's say, produced cooling.
Yeah.
Right. But for the hukama, the heating effect is something that is a non-accidental feature of the essence of fire, right?
Yeah.
When there's fire, okay. So would they say something like there are these forms like fire, but the heat that it produces is accidental, but separable?
Yeah. It's exactly what they say.
Okay.
Right. They don't think that they think that all of these features or properties are
separable accidents.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay. That's.
Yeah. And they're all they don't come from the entity. They actually come from an external source. Right.
I see.
And this is based on their particular ontology, which is an ontology of atoms and accidents. Right. They're not committed to these like real essences that have necessary features.
Okay, I see.
Can you hear me now? Or no?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, sorry, I was 2 points. I guess one on this.
Oh, you're cutting off again.
What about now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Are these, we can say that there's no like necessary or separable like inserting. That all of these accidents are able separated from the essence.
All the accidents are separable?
All of these accidents, like for instance the heat of the fire, for
Yeah.
instance,
Yeah.
it's inseparable from, according to the standard view, right? Is that it's a necessary concomitant.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And for like the hukama, if heat is not, coming from the fire, then there's some external factor that's preventing that heat from coming. Otherwise, naturally, the heat will come.
Yeah.
Right? If it's left to its own
Exactly.
proper conditions.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
Sorry, my second thing, the earlier question I was going to ask was that are these does it have a relationship to this idea of a complete cause, in the sense that for the mutakallimin, these intermediaries do not add any causal, force into the whole equation, and so the complete cause is God, let's say.
Yeah.
Whereas for the hukama, it's that, there are these, complete cause includes God plus
Yes.
intermediaries.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's a denial of this idea of that, there's this aspect of complete cause.
Yeah, exactly. The complete cause is God.
Right.
If he wants to, he could just bring about the effect even without any occasion.
Right.
Right, but he does it the way that he does in a regular way, okay,
Mm-hmm.
For reasons unscrutable to us at the end of the day, right? But for the hukama, it's not like this, right? He's the complete cause of one thing and only, and the cause of everything else through intermediaries.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And of other things, it's him plus other entities together that are the complete causes.
They basically deny the powers of natures.
Yes. That's right. Right? That's why he says here, he's he has no intermediary, i.e. of the sort that the hukama mention, في تأثير, right? The وسائد إعدادية, they're only وسائد عادية.
It's very interesting. I don't know if anyone just turned the tables on them in terms of like, these claims of kufr and these sorts of things. I don't know if anyone has ever said.
Actually, someone has said those things, namely Ibn Taymiyyah.
No. I'm talking about who? About who?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say kufr on the mutakallimin.
Yeah.
Because, well, in one aspect, for instance, if you take the famous, phrase, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah,
Yeah.
right? There is a bit before the Allah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They deny the ba of the
Right. Yeah.
la, right?
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, Ibn Taymiyyah actually criticizes their occasionalism on textual grounds. I don't know if he ever says, I haven't read his corpus where he ever says, this is just kufr, but he does say that they actually fail to uphold like the dhahir of these verses. Yani the dhahir of these verses indicates that other things enjoy some kind of efficacy, but they fail to do justice to these verses. He does say that he has criticisms of them on textual grounds.
Interesting, I think the Ash'aris, they will critique the Falasifa on textual grounds as well.
Yeah.
Namely the story of Ibrahim,
right.
Salam, right? And they said that, well, how do you explain the hadith if you think that like fire necessarily burns?
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting actually because some of the hukama have used that same verse to push back. Because if you consider that verse, what does it say? It says that, God told the fire to cool, right? As if acting against its natural tendency, right? So they think that at the very least, it's not decisively in favor of their position, right? So they go back and forth on this, but Ibn Taymiyyah in particular strongly critiques the Ash'aris on textual grounds. He brings up a lot of verses whose apparent meaning, whose prima facie meaning is one that is, not occasionalist, or is even against an occasionalist reading.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the Ash'aris are very sneaky when they even call Allah Ta'ala Musabbib al-Asbab.
Yeah.
Because in a way, they don't even believe in Asbab.
Yeah. For them, Asbab are just, occasional Asbab. Or Asbab Adiyya.
Asbab Adiyya, yeah.
Right.
They're very thinly, construed causes.
Yeah. That's why, one of the remarkable things that the Sheikh does when he refutes or attempts a refutation of occasionalism, he actually, tries to do it on the basis of premises that is shared between him and his theological opponents, the Mu'tazili or some of the Ash'aris, right? And he doesn't try and just make this sort of argument that Ibn Rushd makes when he criticizes occasionalism, or one of the main arguments Ibn Rushd makes, which has to do with this idea that, they basically ruin science.
Yeah.
Right? Which is an argument, by the way, that becomes the standard argument of the scholastics against occasionalism. That actually comes from Ibn Rushd.
Yeah, well, they're presumably arguing against Occam, right, who also held, I believe, a similar position.
I don't know that he was an occasionalist, but there was
maybe I'm confusing him he held phenomenalism, not occasionalism.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Malebranche.
Yeah, Malebranche, these are the later thinkers, but there was this one particular scholastic thinker who was known to be an occasionalist that was critiqued by the others, on the basis of this Rushdian argument. But the Sheikh never makes this kind of argument, because it's so, in a way, question-begging, right? The Mutakallimin can just say, look, yeah, that's, science is not in the business of discovering these essential causes.
Yeah.
Science is we're just kind of noting, observing, categorizing regularities. That's all. Something like that, right? So that whole critique presupposes like the entire sort of peripatetic, scientific framework, which has a certain ontology.
Like a certain necessary relation already.
Yeah, exactly. So he doesn't make this kind of argument. He actually makes a whole different kind of argument. If you guys are interested, I have a whole paper on that, which I've titled, this Sheikh on proving the existence of causal powers in bodies. Right. So it's interesting because one of the things he tries to do there, he tries to grant this assumption of the involvement of a separate cause in the production of effects down here, right? For the theologians, this is God, right? But he goes on to try and show that even if, the volitional agency of this external agent was necessary, it still wouldn't be sufficient. So that we need to, acknowledge that there's something in these bodies here that we observe that makes a real causal contribution to the effects, even with the involvement of that external agent, and even if that external agent is a volitional agent, right? So he tries to grant them like as much as he can, but still argue against them that these powers here have some kind of efficacy, which is very interesting, right? All on the basis of premises that are supposed to be shared.
Right.
Yeah. I can send that around if you guys want.
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah. I say let's stop here, inshallah, and pick up on page 97, line 1 next week. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.